right, we might get straight into it. So we have a very special guest tonight who is a bit of a regular as well. He's very generously given up his time and spent a bit of effort on the presentation. So welcome, Tony Cordato.
Thanks, Amy. Has anyone stayed in an Airbnb property apart from me? Great. How did you find it? Yeah, something like what it looked like on the advert? Yeah? Would you stay in one again? Yeah? Okay. Now, who has been an owner and rented out an Airbnb property? Well, there's a few. Great. Are you still renting them out? Yep. Okay. I'm a property lawyer, and I happen to like to do tourism as well. So when Airbnb came along, I thought this is the perfect marriage of property and tourism experience. I love properties. I prefer cash flow properties to almost anything in the world. Good cash flow properties. And when Airbnb came along, it had that accommodation idea, because your return, if you're running a resort or hotel, is roughly 15%. Your return on a standard property, well, in Sydney, could be 3%. Big gap. Marry the two, and you might be able to get that return in Sydney up maybe to 5%, maybe to 6%. And just by using the same technique as the hoteliers use. So it was really exciting to watch it come good. And at the moment, there's a whole lot of nothing in the internet about Airbnb because no one can get their head around it because it takes too many disciplines to know about. So I'm trying tonight to give you an overview of Airbnb in New South Wales. New South Wales is, for some reason, a hotspot for Airbnb. There's about 30,000 properties in New South Wales. There's 70,000 in Australia, and there's about 2 million around the world. Big figures. So, the New South Wales government has been reporting on short-term letting, is what they call it. Why is it short-term letting? It is less than 3 months. That's why it's short-term letting. So what is more than 3 months? A residential tenancy. So that's the cut-off point. Short-term, less than 3 months. Long-term, and you have to have a signed lease and comply with all that residential tenancy stuff after 3 months. So we're playing in a fairly unregulated area. It's not residential tenancy. It's the area, the playground of the hotels, motels, backpackers' places, farm stays, service departments. So, what am I going to talk about tonight? The planning laws. Well, they've decided in this state that Airbnb is a planning issue. What are the special things to look at if you're doing Airbnb in a home unit, strata unit, townhouse? I'll have a look at Airbnb. Then I'll look at, the boring but quite interesting things about tax and insurance. And I'll have Carol Curtis, who's a mortgage broker who's done a few Airbnb mortgage deals to wrap up on the mortgage side. So, let's go. It's a planning issue. Planning issues are dealt with by the state government through their district plans, DCPs, and the local government through the LEPs, local environmental plans. And so the state government has said all this stuff is tourist and visitor accommodation. So what's tourist and visitor accommodation? Bed and breakfast. Serviced apartments also means serviced houses, serviced granny flats and so on. Backpackers, farm stay, hotel and motel. So you can see where it's all come from. It came from the old hotel motel, and it's diversified into these other forms of tourist and visitor accommodation. We'll look at bed and breakfasts because that's in-stay, where the person is having a guest in their house. And we'll be looking at serviced apartments, which is renting whole apartments, whole houses, whole granny flats, and whole caravans, if you're into that kind of thing. So let's look at a planning approval. This is a typical planning scheme. It's called low density residential. All those houses you see out there are R2 low density residential. What can you do in a low density residential? There's one thing, can you see it? One form of tourist and visitor accommodation. Bed and breakfast. That's it. And that, you have to get approval if you're running a bed and breakfast, council approval. You cannot get approval to run a serviced apartment in an R2 low density residential. But you can get approval for a bed and breakfast. So let's have a look at what bed and breakfasts do. Bed and breakfasts must be an existing dwelling house, like not an office, not a shop, not a factory, a dwelling house. No more than 4 guest bedrooms. Yeah, I found that quite surprising. What are you if you're more than 4 bedrooms? You're a motel or a boutique hotel. So bed and breakfast up to 4 bedrooms. Must have 1 guest bathroom. Well, it's pretty mean, really. line up in the morning, but there you are. Fire regulations, yes, fire extinguisher, a fire blanket in the kitchen, fire evacuation plan, at least 1 off-road car parking space per bedroom. Well, that's an interesting requirement. It'll kind of fill up the backyard quite quickly. Not display any advertisement. I guess they don't want any big signs in front of the premises, not like what's in the photo. And if they're a strata property, to have a bed and breakfast use, you must have the approval of the owner's corporation. Now, each council has their own little twists. So I've given you one example. The Sydney City Council says, well, even though you can have up to 4 guest bedrooms, we're only allowing 3 and only allowing 6 guests. You must offer at least breakfast, i.e. what's bed and breakfast all about. You cannot have a sink or a stove or anything in the guest bedroom. And the person operating it must be resident. Now, if you fulfil all of those requirements, councils will give you approval for bed and breakfast. And of course, the question you're going to ask, well, what if we're just below the threshold? I'll come to that. But this is where councils want to corral people into getting approval for a bed and breakfast. Now, how successful, we'll see in a minute. Let's have a look at serviced apartments, hotels, motels. Now you notice something about the zoning. Can you see what zoning this is? This is Zone B4, mixed use. B is for business. So if you're thinking of, well, having a couple of serviced apartments in a building, or running more a hotel or motel without having breakfast necessarily, or without being on site, you need to be in a business zoning. And as you can see here, permitted with consent, hotel and motel accommodation. Do you see bed and breakfast there? No. Bed and breakfast is for residential areas, motels, hotels, and commercial serviced apartments are for business areas. That's it. So you've got to, look at your zoning before you decide what you're doing. What are serviced apartments, holiday lettings? I was up at Lennox Head the other weekend, and I noticed a real nice old-style brochure in the windows. There's this beautiful place there for about $2,000 a week with the bottle of champagne on the table and so on. And that was the old-style way of holiday lettings. Holiday lettings, serviced apartments, treated the same way. They can be a cabin, an apartment, a house, granny flat, studio. Must be permitted in the zoning. So in areas like Lennox Head, there'll be a holiday zoning as some kind of subsidiary, some sort of mix between residential and business. There's a holiday zoning. Provide self-contained accommodation. Well, all you have to do is to change the bedding and clean it out. You don't have to provide breakfast in serviced accommodation. They can go up the road to the coffee shop. So they're serviced by the owner. The owner does not have to live on site. Sydney City Council is a little stricter. So they have minimum sizes for the rooms, something like 3.5 metres by 2.4 minimum. They've got minimum sizes for ceilings. They have fire safety, of course, sound insulation between apartments, and there must be storage. I mean, by storage they mean a cupboard or built-in wardrobe. Adequate kitchens, toilets, showers and laundry, so standard apartment/house. A plan of management. Now there's bureaucracy for you. Don't you like a plan of management to have a little serviced apartment? Annual certification, yeah, I guess so. And fire safety. Smoke alarms, fire blanket, fire extinguisher. So that's a serviced apartment. Summary. If you're occasionally renting 1 or 2 spare rooms, and if you live on the property, I think you're okay. The government hasn't really put definitions in place. They'll put that in place later on this year as to exactly where the line is to be drawn between we're not regulating it and where we want you to get formal council approval. If you're leasing it out for more than 3 months, well, of course, it's long term. Planning approval. Well, 3 or 4 bedrooms rented as bed and breakfast, yes. You ask the council at the moment. The experience is the councils are saying, thank you for letting us know, but we're not interested in asking you to submit an application. But it may change. It may change. One criteria they're likely to introduce is if the rooms or the use is for more than 60 or 90 days a year. And that follows from what happens in London. If the use is more than 60 days a year, you've got to have local approval. So they might put in their approval limits on guests per room. Yep, two adults per room, generally speaking. Noise insulation, fire safety, plan of management and certification. So the government's about to issue a consultation paper on all this, and I'm sure it'll raise quite a lot of controversy. So can we stop there? Is there anybody who has a comment or a question? No? I've got you all in the zone. Business or residential? Okay, well, let's get on to the next one. Strata. Oh, God. If I read another post about Airbnb or short-term lettings in strata apartments, it'll be like about the 1,000th I've read. It is such a hot topic, particularly in high-rise. And why is it a hot topic? Because of section 139. Do you want to read section 139? I'll read it to you. No bylaw is capable of operating to prohibit or restrict the devolution of a lot or a transfer, lease, mortgage or dealing with a lot. In other words, a bylaw cannot restrict an owner of a strata property from leasing their lot. No restriction. They can't say you can't lease it out for less than so many days. They can't say you can't have it for visitor accommodation. They're not allowed to. This is strata title, and for this purpose it operates just like a house. If you own a house, you've got no restrictions on leasing. If you own a strata unit, you have no restrictions on leasing. None at all. If the tenant behaves themselves, that's about it. There is no restriction on who you've got as a tenant. And that's been in the strata laws since strata laws started in this state in 1961, and it's not going to change. There's no restriction.
The bylaw, though, can't overrule the planning zones.
The bylaw cannot overrule the Strata Schemes Management Act.
Can lease, but if the planning zone is that there's no tourist accommodation.
Sorry?
I say, you can say that you can lease, but if the zone that the strata units are in says no tourist accommodation, there's no tourist accommodation.
Yeah, that's right. That's how they're going to regulate it. They're going to work off the planning scheme rather than the bylaws.
So all I'm saying is we've just been talking about planning schemes with you. They come over into strata as well.
Oh yes, they do. Yeah, so instead of the owners' corporation regulating short-term letting, they're giving it to the council to regulate. That's the message. And if owners try to do it, they're wasting their time. It's just invalid, illegal.
How would you recommend informing the body corporate that who are opposing to an Airbnb arrangement with you as a landlord?
So the question was, what would you do if how would you advise the body corporate if they're opposed to Airbnb? Well, for a start, have a look at what the local zoning says. I mean, it's either got serviced apartments, bed and breakfast, or it doesn't. But you might have to wait until the end of the year till we get the guidelines from the state government as to where to draw the line.
So basically to help you out, because it's a grey area. You have to...
It is a grey area.
100 times before you talk to owners preferring, because they will get on you if they dig too much. That's what it's trying to say.
Yeah, we're just talking that it's going to be a grey area for a bit longer yet. Yeah.
You better not to argue with the on the corporation at this point in time?
Well, you could. The question was, do you argue with the owners' corporation? The answer is you can, because the owners' corporation are not running the show anymore. A deliberate policy by the state government to take away the power from the owners' corporations in strata plans to regulate short-term letting and give it to the local council. And that's what's causing these thousands and thousands of posts and articles. Yeah, go.
When did this section 139, when did that come in?
This? 1961. Well, 1961 was the original strata law, 1974 was the new one, 95 was the then new one, and 2015 is the latest one. You can track it all the way through.
A lot of the city apartments, I believe, are under R2 and strata.
Yeah, a lot of city apartments are strata, yeah.
But they, the building regulations don't allow people to lease in the building for less than 3 months. So how do you get around that?
Yeah, the question was, in some of these buildings, there's a building regulation which disallows leasing for less than 2 months. Well, the answer is that regulation is a waste of paper. Because you can't... This is section 139. This overrules any building regulation because all building regulations are made under the auspices of the strata titles laws. They're not the strata title law. That's how it works.
There's restrictions on the council's got those restrictions.
The council's got restrictions. What they've done, see, what the owners' corporations and all the strata bodies were saying, we should have the power, and the government said, forget it. Councils are the people to determine use, not strata owners. So they will be giving a few little concessions to the strata owners' corporations. And the concessions will be to sort of around the edges. They'll be, for example, the use has to be approved by council. So residential use, residential units, I think the use is approved by council. Require owners to notify the owners' corporation at least 21 days before turning their apartment into a short-term letting apartment. Now, I think that's a good bylaw to put in. It's not a standard bylaw, it's one that you'll have to put in if you want it in. Owners' corporations technically should be notified of all tenancies. I don't know how they're going to do it every night to somebody new with a short-term letting, but that's what it is. The main issues that strata owners have is noise, disruptive behaviour and illegal parking. Unfortunately, they've just got to take action on each instance to issue a breach notice to the owner. There's also issues for high-rises with the access cards and swipes. I mean, everyone's given an access card and swipe, which means they might as well just leave the front door open. There's no security. Tighten up bylaws dealing with damaged common property. Yes, well, of course, people bring their wheelie bags in and start knocking the lift linings around and the walls around. The 2 adults per bedroom is in the strata law. You cannot have more than 2 adults per bedroom, unless, of course, it's in the inner city and they're students. Impose a levy. Yeah, this was an interest. This is actually in the government latest strata titles handbook. They said you can impose a levy surcharge if there's extra strata insurance premiums payable because of a short-term letting use. I mean, if you have insurance, it's always more expensive to insure a business than it is to insure a home. So if the strata levies do go up for that reason, you can claw that back from the owner who's allowing the short-term letting. So there's things you can do, but you can't stop it. Just make it hard. Some people don't like the disruption. They like a nice, quiet building, you know.
Security is a big issue. I worked in Strata, and if you're coming in through a common door, people feel very uncomfortable with daily change of people in and out through the hallway that they step out onto.
Well, I better not have any visitors then.
I'm just saying.
What is it?
Don't have visitors, people, they're strangers.
Yeah, that's a good point though, the strangers thing. You know, some people just don't like strangers.
As the Strata manager with so many meetings, with, you know, a lot of individual people live in Strata because they feel some security in it, and suddenly they're not secure. They've got regular strangers that are not known to anybody coming in and out.
Well, we know who's in the next door anyway, really. They go on, you know, like really, they're just self people.
I'm just explaining what I know.
Now, actually, there's but okay. So, who thinks that it would be disruptive and would be uncomfortable if they lived in a strata unit and there were people coming and going all the time?
There's people coming and going all the time anyway.
Yeah. And who thinks they should just all be owner-occupiers or 6-month tenants? No one.
I was living in a unit that had short-term student rentals 2 doors down, and one of them had told all the others in the room that I was at home with my baby, and if they needed to get in, to just buzz me. So I was getting 10 buzzes a day because they only allowed 2 swipe keys in their unit, and they had I think 12 units.
And did you like it? No. Yeah. Anyway, if you want to throw a bomb at your next dinner party, that's the bomb to throw. How you really like to see new people come in and out every day, that pulling those wheelie bags.
Concierge normally has to give access to people to be able to have the access cards. So is there something that you recommend people can do? Because I've lived in a city and I know that they're pretty strict with the access cards.
You don't actually need access cards anymore. There's technology that you can change the hardware, and there's an app that you get. And
Oh, that sounds dodgy.
It's not dodgy at all. You get an app, and everyone gets a different code, and all they need is the phone to take it up to the lock and unlocks it.
No, I'm talking about access cards to go up the lift.
But I'm saying you don't need it anymore.
To go up the lift?
There's different technology available now that you don't need swipe cards.
Wow. Alright, but I'm not sure if that's quite the answer though.
Yeah, no, security's a big issue, but there's a lot of issues with it, and I don't know that they're going to solve it in the next 6 months when the state government brings out its draft guidelines. I think they're just going to inflame it. But anyway, so enjoy it. Airbnb. Oh. Anyone ever heard how Airbnb started? Yeah? So San Francisco, round about August 2008 or sometime slightly before it, these two guys were renting a flat and they were running short of money. There was a convention in town. Well, there was going to be a convention in town in about 2 or 3 weeks, and they realised that there was nowhere anyone could stay. So they thought, we've got a loft, why don't we buy 3 air beds, blow them up, and advertise at $80 a night per airbed, and we'll throw in breakfast. And that's how it started. They They thought this was just something you just do when there's a convention in town. So the next convention was the Democratic Party convention in August 2008, and that was when Obama was nominated as the nominee for the Democrats. So they thought, okay, this is Dallas, let's just do the same thing. And they did the same thing, and not with properties they owned. They had people who just rented out airbeds and gave breakfast, and they still called it airbed and bed and breakfast. And they thought, okay, well, it applies to conventions, and then we'll have to wait for the next convention. And then they thought, how come we got all these people in our books in towns and cities where there's no actual convention going on? It didn't click. They had 27 properties in New York. They were in San Francisco. They went and saw a guru. What are we going to do? How do we develop this business? You know, we're only making $400 a week. How do we do it? He said, get on the next plane and go to New York and talk to every one of those 27 people. And they said, okay. And they figured out how it worked, which was you didn't need a convention, you just needed people who were willing to offer their home, or a room in their home, for visitors. What they did discover, though, was the photographs those 27 people had taken of their home were hopeless. So they rephotographed them, and guess what happened? The income went up. It went to $1,200 a week, you know, within weeks. And then they realised that, well, this is probably going to work everywhere. So they scaled up. Okay, so today there's 2 million properties. 2 million properties. And this is how they describe themselves. They're in fact a booking service. Airbnb connects people to unique travel experiences. Okay, that's interesting. That's not what you see in a hotel. Do hotels connect people to unique travel experience? No. This is the differentiation. In more than 34,000 cities, 191 countries. 191 countries is pretty impressive. I think there's only about 200 odd countries in the world. So next time you're in deepest Africa and you go to Lesotho, there might be an Airbnb. Airbnb is the easiest way for people to monetise their extra space. So, you know, they're still liking that idea of the airbed and showcase it to an audience of millions, which of course is their search engine. Showcasing it to an audience of millions is really powerful. You saw that ad we had for the house in Lennox Head. I mean, that was in the window of an estate agent. That's showcasing that property to, you know, maybe a couple of thousand people. You put it on Airbnb and you are showcasing it to millions. That is the power of what they're doing. So, before I go into that, so it's a company which is today worth, well, do you want to guess how many $1 billion? Do I start with 5? Go up? Yep. 10? 15? 20? $25 billion. $25 billion is what this idea is worth. And good luck to them. They run a good business, and this is what they do. Everybody is their own hotelier. You're the host. You set the rent. You set the stay, 1 night, 2 night, whatever. you set the rent higher than what you'd rent the room for on a weekly or monthly basis. How much higher do you think? What premium do you get per room doing it on short-term letting versus long-term letting on a per room basis? Anyone done the figures? What? Double. Yeah. Gladys has an example there of something like, what was your example?
2,850 a month.
2,850 a month normal, yeah.
Versus 4,500 in the first 12 months.
Versus 4,500 using short-term letting. That's in Newstead in Brisbane. And that's quite typical. Something like 40-50% is quite typical. I'm pleased that you actually get 100%. So it's quite powerful if you're prepared to change the sheets and clean up the rooms and answer the inquiries you get. The guest makes the booking and pays in advance. Pays in advance. I like that. Pays in advance. The host vets the guest before confirming the booking. Well, Airbnb also vet everyone. You can't be a host unless you've been vetted. You can't be a guest unless you've given passport details, all kinds of details. So you're vetted as well. Then we get this cute phrase, this is therefore the sharing economy, because everyone shares. Because the host and guest connect with each other through a website platform. Okay, well, the sharing economy is a real term of art. Okay, now the other genius of Airbnb is it costs the host 3%. The host who has that house in Lennox Head would be paying how much commission for a holiday let to that agent? Maybe 15? Yeah. 3% versus 15. Very attractive. Who pays the rest? Well, the guest. The guest. On top of your rent, the guest pays Airbnb 6 to 12%. And on top of the rent, the host can charge a cleaning fee. $10, $15, $20. Well, cleaners don't get paid much these days. So the model is weighed in favour of the owner. You lose 3%. And you can charge for cleaning. Does that sound good? Yeah. Okay, well, let's go to the next. I've done a screenshot there today of some Airbnbs in Bondi. Now, you've all heard of Bondi. Well, not only you've heard it, most tourists have heard about it too. So when they want to stay in Bondi, they will just do something like that, find the Airbnbs in Bondi. And what really got me here was the variety, the scale. You start down the bottom with $31 per night. You get to 80, up to right at the top, 184 per night. These are all per night. So the variation is just enormous. And if you clicked on any of those, you'll actually see the photos of the particular place. And you can go anywhere in Sydney, anywhere in New South Wales, anywhere in Australia, and you just hone in and you find who's got Airbnb and what they're charging. You can even find out who they are, because as hosts, they're supposed to give you a nice host's welcoming statement. Hi, we're Marg and Tom. You know, we've owned our house and we love our garden and we have 2 dogs, that kind of stuff. So, the prime sites are the hotels and apartments located on the fringes of a CBD or near good transport links, because they're cheaper than hotel space in those same locations. Holiday houses are another class. They're attractive because they're near beaches, waterways, scenic attractions. Percentages. Okay, there's a big divide here between people who rent rooms in the house that they're in for short-term letting and people who rent whole apartments, houses, granny flats. The big divide. So 40% rent rooms within their house. 60% rent apartments, granny flats or houses as a whole. So the investor market is right into it. Right into it, 60%. And a lot of those investors have, well, not a lot, 30% of those investors have more than one. So, boost the cash flow 50%, just keep doing it. And yeah, obviously have an arrangement for the cleaning. Obviously have an arrangement for collection of the key. Airbnb provides the arrangements for payment. So, rules for hosts. Yes, no, let's go for rules for hosts. There was an interesting issue decided in the Supreme Court in Victoria last year. As a tenant of an apartment had decided to use Airbnb to make some extra income. So he was advertising, the tenant, was advertising a room on Airbnb. The landlord wasn't happy. The landlord thought it was a breach of the lease because the lease prohibits subletting. The tenant said, this is not subletting. This is only for one night or for a series of nights. That's not subletting. This is just a licence to occupy. The Supreme Court sided with the landlord and said it was subletting. Therefore, it was a breach of the lease and the landlord got their eviction order. I haven't heard what the landlord did then as to whether they just put it on Airbnb. But it's something for owners to do, not something for tenants, is the upshot of that.
So Tony, that was in Victoria. Does that mean that rule stands for Victoria or it goes across the board now?
Now, the rule stands for across the board because we've got pretty similar tenancy laws around Australia. So that's an Australian rule. If you get onto one of those maps and see your rental house with an Airbnb sticker on it, you know what to do. Kick the tenant out and keep the Airbnb sticker.
But I thought in the rental tenancy you can't prohibit them from actually subletting.
The standard residential tenancy lease, you can't, without be unreasonable. Okay, well, that was argued in the Supreme Court and they said, no, it was reasonable for them not to have Airbnb. If you have the owner's consent, it's different. But most owners, like I don't give approval for subletting. I want to be introduced to the people who are going to give me my money every week. That's just me. I just want to know who it is. Yeah. I mean, you actually get to that next situation of, you know, you've all heard of party houses.
But then your tenant's responsible for that.
Yeah. Sorry?
The tenant's then responsible for that.
Yeah, the tenant's responsible.
So you know.
Yeah, okay. The party houses are for the Airbnb party houses, yeah.
So your tenant's ultimately responsible.
Yeah, if the tenant did that, they're responsible. But how much bond do you have? 4 weeks.
Yeah, nothing.
It's not enough. Just not enough 4 weeks. Sorry? If they don't have the landlord's consent, the landlord can refuse to give consent if the sublease is for Airbnb.
Yep.
That's the point. And that Supreme Court Victoria, reasonably good court, it would be followed in this state. Hosting standards. The holiday letting people have a whole lot of codes of conduct for people who run holiday lettings. So Airbnb has decided that's probably not a bad idea. So it's got what they call hosting standards. So it's a code of conduct, including verification of the identities of the guests. So, you know, some kind, normally a passport. They require this information from both hosts and guests, including contact phone numbers, because things can happen. The interesting part about Airbnb is they've got their own review process. So hosts will review guests, guests will review hosts during or after the stay. Now hotels try and do that, but mostly they're not really interested in those survey cards. Airbnb is very interested.
I'll just say I've got 2, right, and I'm just so over giving reviews to people, so I just don't do that anymore. I'm just wondering if they're pinning me for that or not. I don't know, but...
Sorry, for what?
Okay, so I have 2 Airbnbs, but these, for the last... Like, I've had more than 100 stays, and I just don't bother with doing reviews anymore.
You don't bother with the reviews?
I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just over it.
That Airbnb person doesn't review. Why? Because...
I don't do most of the cleaning.
You don't see the point of it, I guess.
No, it's just that, you know, people stay for a few days, like, and it's just an extra bit of work. I wouldn't mind if it's just the thumbs up and thumbs down, but I think they ask more questions and I can't be bothered with it.
Okay, so it's too much work to do the reviews. And anyway, you've never had a really bad...
I've had about 3 bad ones.
You've had 3 bad ones. What did they do?
Oh, I had one group burn carpet. I had one group,
So one ruined the carpet.
Yeah, but I charged them and they paid me for that. That was good.
Sure.
But they came in with 4 people rather than 3 people. I had another one who was like used all my towels. That they were supposed to check out at 10. They didn't check out, so just stuffed up my cleaning routine, and they left the place really messy after 3 days.
So the second people took all the towels and left the place messy.
The towels were still there,
But they used them all. Yeah.
And only staying for 3 nights or something. And then I had probably one other bad guest, but I've had probably 150 guest stays over 2.5 years, so over 2 properties pretty much. So I've had a lot of very, very good guests.
So in 2.5 years, you've had about 3 bad experiences. That's why you don't do reviews.
I just sort of too much work. Well, the thing is, I don't see most of my guests at all because they're all properties that I own. I don't live there.
Yeah, you have someone manage it for you.
Somebody else clean it for me.
Yeah. Yeah, you have a cleaner and manager and so on. Yeah, of course. Of course.
Did you give bad reviews to the people who did?
Okay, so you gave bad reviews to those 3 guests who were bad. Yeah, okay. That's good. But you found the review system a bit time-consuming.
Good.
Yeah.
Because they pay up
So the paying up front is very attractive, yeah.
Whereas I've also used Stays and I've used Booking.com, and Booking.com I've had some bad experiences with it, because like there's one burning up.
Okay, so you've tried other internet...
Having to manage the money is a bit annoying, so Airbnb is good in that you don't have to worry about it. It's just going to
Yeah, Airbnb just drops it into your account, don't they? Yeah. There's no money management at all. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas other booking engines, you've got to manage the money.
At this stage, you have to sort of look at the calendar. It doesn't sync with Airbnb or Booking.com, whereas Airbnb and Booking.com, they'll sync. Stage doesn't, so you sort of have to manage the dates and stuff a little bit yourself.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of work.
So you've actually tried Stays as well?
Yes. And so I have a property that's on the 3 different websites.
Oh, you put it on?
Yes.
Yeah, multiple listed.
And the thing is, I might have, say, instant booking on Airbnb, but Airbnb syncs with Booking.com, but Stays I always would have to get a request from the guest, because I might already have it booked out through Airbnb or Booking.com, because it doesn't sync with the other websites.
Yeah, yeah. So you have to manage the interface between those websites. Yeah.
Tony, I've just got a point on that. I think you sound like a seasoned host, which I think is fabulous, and 3 out of the 150 plus is a fantastic, positive experience. If anybody's thinking of doing Airbnb to begin with, the level of confidence that new visitors will have on your property is purely based on reviews.
Yeah.
So reviews are your investment for the future repeat business.
Yeah, but say I've got more than 100 reviews on a place, so it's like I don't really need...
No, but I'm saying, which is great.
Yeah.
But what people look at, particularly if there's a long time since your last review, people want to see, does the decor still look as well? What age was the review? So I know it might be a bit laborious, but it's still time
I'll
and
still
effort.
see their reviews, so it just takes 2 weeks before the review pops up, before you can see it on the website.
Oh, okay.
And they also, I've read some things where they actually, with the guests, they'll only see the guests that come from their own country first in the review listing.
Yeah.
And then, because so now it's not in reverse chronological order or chronological order, it'll be based on the people who have stayed from their own country.
Okay.
Yeah.
But for new potential hosts, I think reviews are fantastic.
Yes, so definitely, you need a body of reviews before you...
Yeah, so what you say, a body of reviews to start with, and then you can get slack. Yeah, okay, all right. Of course, Airbnb does try and weed out the bad people. They do have a blacklist, and a watch list, then a blacklist. And favourable reviews are just like favourable TripAdvisor reviews. They're good things. Tax. Yeah, I did a master's in tax. I like it. But I don't like paying it. So tax is important. The tax office has actually issued a paper. If you go down the bottom line, it's called ATO, the sharing economy and tax. Even the ATO loves the word sharing economy. If you go to that page, you'll find everything that I've got on this page. But roughly, a rental is a rental. Doesn't matter where it comes from. Short-term, long-term tenant, holiday tenant, business tenant, it's a rental. And therefore rentals are taxable income. The ATO will get given a copy of your rental statement by Airbnb. Airbnb doesn't sort of hand it. What happens is at the end of each year, just like with the banks, the tax office will just request those records. That's why, I don't know, I love the experience where the tax office knows how much interest I've earned on an account. Well, same here. They will know what you've earned on Airbnb, Stays, or any of the internet booking engines. You can, against your taxable income, of course, you can have deductions. So you have the standard deductions about loan interest proportionate to the room, council and water rates proportionate, strata levies proportionate or to the whole property, insurance, utilities, electricity and gas, and depreciation. If you are using short-term letting for rooms in your own home, it could have some influence on your capital gains tax exemption for your principal place of residence. So they'll carve off that little bit that you're renting out, notionally carve it off from the value of your residence, and you'll pay tax on the increase of, say, an eighth or a sixth or whatever proportion of the residence is devoted to shared accommodation.
But are you saying that they would increase that from the year that you start?
So you started 2017, the house is worth $1 million, you're using 1/6 of the whole house for this purpose, house goes up to $1.2 million, so 1/6 of the increase of 200,000 would become a capital gain that's no longer exempt. So that discourages some people from doing it for their own homes. Yeah.
So what if I'm doing that or buy the room to a place that I live in? So imagine my rent's $1,000 and my income from the other rooms is $900. Is that considered income because I'm still paying a little bit for rent?
Well, you're paying $1,000 for the whole place and you're renting out $900. Yeah, it's a good question. I would actually just offset it. I would offset it. I can't see any reason to do a room-by-room apportionment. It seems to me to have that character of business, of a business.
Yeah. By a real estate agent valuer.
Yeah.
And so that's now in place for, if the house is sold in the future, so that you know the exact amount.
Yeah, so the practical advice is to get a valuation of the house the day you start doing this.
Real estate agent valuer.
Yeah.
You won't cost anything generally, just a local guy.
You can get valuations for capital gains tax purpose for, say, $400. They're not as expensive as a full-blown valuation. A real estate agent is not a qualified valuer. No. Oh, if they are a qualified valuer, yes, but most of them are not.
No, this guy was, so we had him do a valuation for us.
Yeah, they're $400. They're not wildly expensive. There's no GST because it's residential rental. Of course, if you're running it as a business with a turnover of more than $80,000 a year, you start becoming an enterprise and need an ABN and so on. But you worry about it when you have $80,000 a year. You don't worry about it on $20,000 a year. Insurance. Yeah, insurance can send you broke. Well, if you don't have it. Insurance for owner-occupied homes, which we call home building insurance, will not cover your standard short-term letting. Won't cover renting out the spare room. It's specifically excluded. So if you want it covered, you have to get it covered. Insurance companies will offer that kind of cover as a supplement to your standard home building policy. Or if you use Airbnb, they provide their own cover. And this is for the famous slips and trips. You slip on slippery floors and you trip on stairs. it's essential to have insurance cover, so you either use a booking engine that provides it, such as Airbnb. If you look down the bottom of the page, you'll see $1 million AUD host guarantee. That is their public liability cover. So if somebody you've put in through Airbnb injures themselves, they've got $1 million cover. Now, some might argue $1 million is not enough. It's possible it isn't. The worst cases are the quadriplegics. Quadriplegics, well, depends how much when they become quadriplegic. If they become quadriplegic in their 20s or 30s and they're earning big dollars, the bill could be 4 or 5 mil. That's why they have public liability for 10 mil as a standard cover. Because it's hard to imagine a circumstance where someone would have a $10 million damages claim. It's possible, but a bit difficult. You're going to have someone that's earning $500,000 plus a year and is expected to do it for the next 20 years and needs the home modified and needs special care and needs a whole lot of things. Malicious damage is your other issue. That's fairly and squarely the party house issue. It's excluded from standard insurance policies. Anyone you've invited onto the premises who damages the premises, any damage they cause is excluded. That's just the way it is. So Airbnb is aware of this, and they have, bottom right-hand corner, host protection insurance, where they will, to an extent, cover damage. They won't cover damage to, small valuables, paintings or objects, art, all that kind of stuff. But if it's the carpet or the lounge, they'll cover it. Which brings us back to what if it's a serviced apartment or a house? Their investors' insurance policies, landlord insurance policies, do cover short-term lettings because it's an investor's policy. They don't differentiate. So they'll cover short-term lettings for public liability, public risk, but not malicious damage.
So if it was a strata situation and one of your B&B...
Strata situation, yeah.
One of your B&B guests damaged themselves in the common areas, would that be covered on the insurance policy of the strata body corporate?
Yes, the body corporate insurance would cover injuries in common areas to any visitor on the premises, whether they're short-term, long-term, for half an hour or for a couple of hours. Yeah.
Another question. So I've got a place in Brisbane which I Airbnb as well, and so one of the guests, this is not an Airbnb one, but it was through another booking engine, say booking.com. The guest's son did some damage to the window. He maliciously, he kicked it in and the window broke. Is it covered by any of those insurances?
Is it malicious? It's damage, but is it malicious if they lean on a window and it breaks?
He did it. He kicked the window.
He kicked the window.
In anger.
Okay. Situation. He's kicked the window. Who thinks it's malicious?
Depends, is it covered under insurance or not?
Who doesn't think it's malicious? I think the malicious have it. Yeah, I think it's malicious. So that son would have to pay for it. Yeah. Okay.
Tony, what if they get locked out on the balcony and the door locked?
Locked out in the balcony. Well, it's not malicious to try and get in, is it? Well, that's...
But they smash the window to get in.
Yeah. I don't think it's malicious to smash a window to get in if there was just no other choice. But it'd have to be no other choice. Like there'd be a mobile phones, maybe the mobile phones inside. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's just about it, is it? Yes, that's it. Okay, thank you. Could I invite Carol Curtis just to give a quick explanation about how she deals with Airbnb income as a mortgage broker?
Thank
Carol.
you. Thanks, Tony. Sorry, I am losing my voice a little bit, so hopefully it'll last. I'm Carol Curtis, and I am the owner and finance specialist at Curtis Property Investments. We are a family-owned business and have been running for over 13 years now. So basically, just before I do start, I'll just make a little disclaimer because I'm in the credit advice industry as such. So basically all the information that I'm just going to cover now it's just an extremely general nature. And if you need specific credit advice relating to your situation, just please contact me later. All lenders have different policies and they are subject to change at any time without notice. Okay, so now we'll just basically get into it. And I'm just really looking at if you were going to try and get a loan from the bank, whether it was for the security property was run by, you're using Airbnb, or whether you're just trying to, refinance your owner-occupied property or investment property, what the banks or lenders would include as income. So basically, if you are renting rooms in your owner-occupied property through Airbnb, the answer is no. The banks won't accept it. They don't consider it income. If you were renting out your whole owner-occupied house for, holiday let or whatever for short periods of time and so forth, again, no, the banks will not accept it as income. I'm sorry. If you, say, had a granny flat on your owner-occupied property on the same title, that is by a case-by-case basis. Some of the lenders may consider some income for that, but it's usually fairly heavily discounted. Now, on the case where if you have a bed and breakfast, you're running a bed and breakfast and you're earning income from that, yes, the banks will accept that because that's an income-producing business, and the only thing is they class that as self-employment, and you would basically need 2 years' financials to support that. Again, also with service departments, yes, they accept income from service departments. Again, you would have to provide the lease arrangement and also monthly management statements and so forth, and they do discount it as well. For an investment property, if you own an investment property and you were renting out rooms through Airbnb in that investment property, that again is a little bit case-by-case basis as to whether the banks will actually accept it. If the whole property is rented out via Airbnb, short-term accommodation, yes, again, they will accept it as it's an investment property. Again, it's discounted, all right? So if we're talking about what sort of discounts we're looking at, where they reduce the income that you can use, generally speaking, because most of the time they want 2 years' financials, they will look at what you've earned over the 2 years, an average, or they'll take the lower year, and then basically from that income, they will take 60% of that, of the gross rent. So they're quite restrictive. And some of the banks actually have a rule, regardless of what yield you get, you may be getting 12% yield on your property, they take 6%. That's it, full stop. So it's a very hard environment. So what proof is required? What supporting documents do you need to provide to the bank? Generally speaking, they do want the 2 years' tax returns as proof. They would want banking statements showing the rental income going into the bank account over a year, over a 12-month period. And I would actually recommend, if you are getting rent into a bank account for Airbnb or anything else, you actually have a separate bank account for that. Don't use your everyday bank account that shows you shopping at Woolies and everything else. Because they go through everything with a fine-tooth comb, you know. Sorry, yes?
So what's the logic what's the logic in this sort of restricting this? Because most people then would say, well, I'll just get cash. Don't have to pay tax on it. Like, I don't understand the logic.
The Airbnb is relatively new.
Talking about the granny flats.
The granny flats. It's their policy. They don't see it. Anything to do with owner-occupied, it comes into responsible lending. All right? So there's certain rules you have to be, as the owner, that is your principal place of residence as such. It's not, as they will explain to you, it's just not their appetite. It's their policy. They can make their policy whatever they want. And there is no, I mean, you know, I can totally agree with you and say there's no real logic. There's no real logic to why they'll only take 6% yield when you've got a 5-year lease saying you're going to get 12 and it's in your tax return. But they'll take 6%. So, no. But with the banks, there really doesn't have to be a great deal of logic, unfortunately. So basically, you also, any Airbnb statements you get is proof of income. And also, just to mention as well, you still really need, unless you are earning very high incomes, you need your primary employment still, you know, to actually back that up, your PAYG, or if you're self-employed, again, the 2 years financials. Just in summary, as such, as mentioned, all the policies are different. All lenders will have different policies and they will change, all right? So what is today may in 2 or 3 years' time be relaxed a little bit, you know. Even though, the thing is at the moment, even though you may be receiving higher cash flow rental income through Airbnb, which is great, it's not actually going to increase your borrowing capacity with the bank in the short term. Realistically, you're going to need a 2-year history of that to be able to use that, and it will still be discounted unless policy changes. So many lenders, they always come back to the thing, they say, well, we'll assess on a case-by-case situation. And that's true, because they don't only just look at the income, they look at you, they look at your whole asset position, they look at everything, they look at how many properties you got, they look at your exposure. So a lot of the time it is on a case-by-case basis. So really it's extremely important for us, and when we look at a scenario, it's something you want to try and do, that we understand the whole situation so that we can fit you basically with the lender's policies that actually match your circumstances. So really, I mean, that's basically it. It's just a really brief overview. If you would like some more information, come and see me afterwards. We have some general information flyers that we've just put on the tables, as you would see. And if you would like me to contact you afterwards as well, just give me your card, or we've got a little information sheet for name and email, and we can give you some more information. I also have one of my team members here, Hayley, who's been gratefully doing all the slides, also my daughter, and she'll be happy to help you as well. So that's it from me. Carol Curtis from Curtis Property Investments. I hope that's given you a little bit of information and will assist you a little bit on your journey. Thanks for your time, and back to Tony.